I first spotted him on April 30th, clinging to the outside of this huge dead cottonwood branch. But before that, I noticed something else. He looked oddly disheveled. For a moment, I wondered if he was wet or if something was going on with his feathers, but the more I watched, the more it started to make sense. The cavity opening he was working at was still small. He could only get part of his body inside, and each time he backed out, he seemed to brush against the edge of the wood, leaving him looking like a tiny black and white construction worker after a long shift. He would excavate for a few seconds, pause, tilt his head this way and that, and look closely at the work he'd done. Watching him, it really looked like he was assessing which angle to work from next. What struck me most wasn't just the excavation itself, it was the stopping, looking, adjusting, the careful little pauses between bursts of work. Every so often, he would pull out bits of wood dust and chips and toss them away from the opening. And nearby, in the neighboring tree, was the female. Every now and then, he'd turn his head and look in her direction. A few days later, I came back, and at first, it looked like nothing was happening. The cavity opening was there, but there were no woodpeckers in sight. So I waited. Suddenly, his cute little face appeared from inside the branch. I realized that now his work had changed. He wasn't just excavating from the outside anymore. He was inside the cavity, emerging with a beak full of fine wood chips and dust. Sometimes the dust would catch the wind as he tossed it out, blowing away from the cavity like a little puff of sawdust. And this wasn't the first time this branch had caught my attention this spring. Back on March 12th, I saw the female downy drumming on this very branch. At the time, I noticed a faint reddish tinge at the back of her head, almost in a little U shape, and I wondered whether I was really looking at a female or whether I'd mistaken her for a male. Later, seeing her with the male helped me confirm that she was the female of the pair. Now, in woodpeckers, drumming is a form of spring signaling. It's not the same as tapping or drilling into the wood while foraging, and it's not the same as excavating a cavity. Drumming is a display, a way of communicating territory, presence, and readiness to a mate or potential rival. In many ways, it serves the role that song serves for many other birds. But the part that really stopped me in my tracks came from remembering last year. Last year, I followed a downy woodpecker nest in this same dead cottonwood on this same branch, just a little higher up. By the time I found it, the cavity was already well underway. I didn't get to see these early stages from the outside when the opening was still shallow and the bird was still working its way in. But I did get to witness what came later. As the season progressed, the adults began bringing food to the cavity. At first, the visits were quick and easy to miss. A flash of black and white, a pause at the entrance, and then the bird disappearing inside. Each visit told me there were nestlings inside, even when I couldn't see them yet. The young were hidden in the dark of the cavity, but the adult's behavior gave the story away. And then there were the fecal sacs. This is one of those nesting behaviors that can be easy to overlook if you don't know what you're seeing. The adults remove the young bird's waste from the nest, keeping the cavity cleaner. Over time, I noticed those sacs becoming larger, another quiet sign that the nestlings inside were growing. Eventually, a small face appeared at the opening. A young woodpecker would peer out from inside the cavity, looking into the world beyond the branch it had grown up in. Seeing that little face at the opening was enough to know the nest had reached a new stage. I didn't witness the actual fledging moment, but shortly after, I saw an adult male downy woodpecker feeding a young male woodpecker right beside this dead cottonwood tree. The timing was right, and they were close enough to the nest tree that I strongly suspected this was one of the young from that cavity. Of course, I can't say that with absolute certainty, But in the field, sometimes the story comes together through timing, location, and behavior. So, back to this year. When I saw the Downy Woodpecker excavating again, in the same tree, on the same branch, it immediately caught my attention. I don't know if this is the same pair from last year or why this branch has drawn Downy Woodpeckers 2 years in a row. What I do know is this: I'll continue to follow it carefully and share what I observe as the season unfolds. This is Birding with Kaliopi, where a dead branch in the city can become a nursery, a mystery, and a place worth watching closely, one wood chip at a time.